Sweetheart, be reasonable. After all, we're married.
But I'm leaving you. Woman, I've got to put you down.
Consider that a divorce.
Well, if you can't treat me right, ain't no use of me hanging around.
Welcome to this video. I have a guest today, John Farrell. This video is going to join a playlist I already have on annulments, and John takes up the better part of that playlist. And I invited John then, as I am now, because he knows more about annulments, and maybe we'll find out more about the contractual marriage for Catholics than anybody I know, really. I first encountered John, I think probably before we did the videos, probably a few years ago on Facebook, and I think he might have sent me an email, and he was talking about annulments, and my first reaction to him, or my first expectation, was that he was talking about annulments. Most Catholics, when they want to talk about annulments, they talk about how easy they are to get. So let's talk about it. You can get an annulment for this and this. So I really wasn't paying too much attention, and John had to actually send me maybe 3 emails before I got the gist of what he was saying. He says what he was saying was, no, annulments are too easy, and they're a problem with the church. And then it took a lot of convincing for me to understand that that's what John's thing was. So then my first another internal bias I had was that he was talking a lot about canon law, and it was all about 1983. And before having researched this, and John was the one who got me to research it, I was assuming that the Code of 1983 was much easier than the Code of 1917, and that would have been the reason for all the annulments. But in the playlist, I have a side-by-side comparison of the 2 canon laws, and basically 83 copies or restates what's in 1917 canon per canon, and if anything, they've actually dropped a couple subparagraphs or canons. It's been some years since I've looked at it, and it's actually slightly harder to get an annulment under the Code of Canon Law of 1983 if it was being followed correctly. Now, most recently, this is a long introduction, John. Thank you for being patient. Most recently, we did, and this was at John's suggestion. I don't think I worded it exactly the way he wanted me to, but we did a poll on my Twitter page saying, is love a necessary element of marriage? And there were votes on both sides. Most people said, no, it is not. But I think it was something like 60-40. And John, right. I know you have definite thoughts on this. Would you like, and before I even start here, I should say this. John's got a lot of opinions on this broad subject, not just about annulments, but I think the broader about the sacrament of marriage. And he would like to entertain questions. This was originally going to be a live stream. I had a heck of a time getting this started, so we're recording it. So I've asked John if he'd come back and answer the questions. So please post questions.
Yeah, and if we get questions, how am I going to answer them? How is that going to work?
We are going to come back and
redo it. I'll answer every single question. That's one thing I want to try to do. Okay, so FYI, I'm a Novus Ordo Catholic, and I quote accept Vatican II, and I go to Novus Ordo 5 days a week, and then I go to FSSP Friday night and Sunday. So that's kind of what I'm about. But I started, wondering about why do we have all these annulments, and how come there's so much divorce, and what's at the heart of it? And when we talked before, I gave some ideas and stuff, but since then I think I have figured it out. And you mentioned you did that poll: is love required for marriage? Do we need love in order to have a valid marriage? And the answer is no. What do you think? Do you think we need love for marriage, Kirk?
No, it is not necessary. And in fact, but one of the commenters on the poll made a good comment saying that before the modern age, marriages were often arranged, and marriages were pretty much always permanent.
Of course. Right. It's a case of if you start to include love as a requirement, as an essence of marriage, you are including what is infinite, into marriage. And when you do that, no one can consent to what is infinite. You see what I'm saying? You effectively take what's in an enclosed box and you open it to the whole universe. So you cannot, it's impossible to consent where love is required. So right quick, when this was started to happen after Vatican II, they started to incorporate love into the legal definition. And then the Signatura came over to all the people and all the tribunals in Amsterdam stuff and said, knock it off, you guys, you can't do this. But just like communion in the hand, it just took off and no one can stop it because no one wants to say no to love. So my overall point I want to make is that everyone wants love. And when you have love as incorporated or part of the contract of marriage, if you want to call it a covenant, fine, it's the same, then you have all kinds of stuff that goes wrong with it. Everything after 1950, that's when the wheels started to fall off of marriage. And I listed like a list of things that you get when you force love into the legal definition of consent. And I'll run through that list real quick. So private conscience divorce is one of them, because if love is essential, then you get to decide for yourself if then there's, because love triumphs law, you might say. You can say, I'm not feeling this love, I'm not getting this love, therefore there's no marriage here, it's not a sin. And that's why everyone who gets divorced can go to communion, because it's no longer a sin, because marriage is not based on law or justice, it's based on love. Of course, we talked about annulments a little bit. Now I call them no love annulments. That's the vast majority of them. When you take what is essence, meaning babies, permanence, and fidelity, and then you add charity to that list of essence, most people don't get charity 100%, not even you, Kirk. Therefore, you're not capable of marriage under the status quo. You probably knew that. No one can get it perfect. So anyone is, and the annulments become on demand at that point. So the number of annulments before 1950 was about 200 in the USA, and now it's, many thousands, 60,000, 80,000, pick your number. It's just huge. The other problem when you include love in marriage, you eliminate the marital debt, because like I said, when you have love crowds out law. You can't have love and law together because one trumps the other when push comes to shove, right? So this is why John Paul II and who is it? His favorite guy, Christopher West. They speak all about you must respect the freedom of the gift. In other words, consent to marriage is perpetual. This is why there's the marital debt, you've no longer consented to it. It's a perpetual thing. So the consent continues through the life of the marriage. And this is why divorce is not a sin anymore, because if things break apart, there is no, you're not capable of a partnership of life and love. You used to have to just consent to the right over the body. Now you have to consent to a lifetime of perpetual, a lifetime of mutual love, and that's something you can't promise. You can just go for it. So therefore, again, there can only be one first place winner to the Boston Marathon, only one. And you can, like I said, when push comes to shove, you can have law or love, but not both. One's got to trump the other. And that's why marital debt is gone. And like John Paul II says, the freedom of the gift is in. So that you have no more rights, you only have love.
This is the first time anybody's ever quoted John Paul II on this channel, I think.
Really?
Oh,
well,
yeah.
he okay. Who wants to be the bad cop? Nobody. Who wants more love? Raise your hand. Woohoo! Okay, everyone, John Paul II, he's the coolest, right? And everything. I even saw him. Did you ever see him when he came to town?
No.
Back in the day, I think I saw him like 3 times, and oh, groovy, and oh yeah. And that's part of his star power, and everybody loves him. That's how it goes. But behind the scenes, the guy's goofing stuff up because apparently he did a lot of the writing for Humanae Vitae and all kinds of stuff. And because he wanted to get his, what do you call it? Phenomenology into the definition of marriage. So it's experiential, okay? Like I said, if the policeman's going to arrest you and you start saying, I don't feel this is right for me, he's like, put your hands behind your back. In other words, push has to come to shove and something has to win. And that's law. When you have a legal marriage, a wedlock, a lock is a cold, hard thing that ignores your feelings. That lock is locked, okay? But when marriage is based on love, there is no lock. Therefore, there's no problem with divorce. You can get an annulment. There is no marital debt. There's just everyone has got to keep the love going. You know what I mean?
The covenant talk come from? As far as I can tell, it was
Here's how it
introduced by
goes. I'll try to
Scott
explain
Hahn.
it. / new definition of marriage. All Protestants now say covenant. It's another way of saying it's God who's in charge of the marriage, not the bishop. Okay.
And now Catholics take it, yeah, that's a covenant. As far as I can tell, Scott Hahn was the one who brought it over.
Scott Hahn's, he's part of the problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
If you go through all the old documents, church always called it a contract. Now Scott Hahn tries to tie it into other things.
Yeah. Covenant is code, is special language for there are no rights, there's only love. And when you enter a covenant, there's no terms to the covenant. There's just a lifetime of love and all that. And you just kind of, that's why they have all this marriage prep. It is a future lifetime of love. That's your covenant. You're jumping off a cliff into a future of love, and you better be able to provide all that. And if you can't, you're not capable of marriage. Okay. So that's what covenant is, another way of saying we don't want to talk about law. We just want to talk about love. And if something's not right, God's the one in charge, not the local ordinary. But a contract has terms, and you cannot consent to a contract unless you can look at what's on the terms and say, yes, I want these things. And I'm going to say, and I'm capable of these things, and I'm going to say yes to these things, sign here. This is gone with the covenant because you can say, well, it's just a future of love. And this is why the Protestants are all over it too, because they have no church, no governing authority. They got nothing except the Bible and God. That's it. So they can't do marriage law. And once the Protestants had to, they're supposed to fall back on the bishop because they're baptized, but they would fall back on the state. And when the state had fault-based divorce, they could get away with it and call it a contract because they at least had the state to back up the marriage. But now no fault is no justice. And in fact, you could say not the Catholic Church, but the people in charge running things at the church today are almost in favor of no fault divorce because they say marriage is not based on justice. Therefore, they don't want any justice in the divorce system. So they're almost pro no fault because to them, there are no rights. There's just love or no love.
But it seems to me that part of this problem comes from time-wise, it definitely came after World War II. So a lot of this is in the culture, though.
Can I tell you how it started?
Go ahead.
So yeah, and you can interrupt if you want. Started after, the reason I say 1950 is 1951 is when we got NFP. So love was in the air in the 20th century, and it's been prophesied that all heck was going to break loose after 1950. Our Lady of La Salette and all that sort of stuff, and good counsel, good success. So the Lambeth Conference of Anglicans started saying procreation is primary, therefore we're not going to allow contraception. And then in 1930 they reversed that and they said we are going to allow contraception. Therefore they have just said we have a new definition of marriage, a new primary purpose. And everyone was pushing for that, and everybody wanted that. And everyone wanted, it was like, don't you, what are you, against love? Are you just
well, I think the culture changed. Certainly the cross is gone.
Yes.
And I think it started to some extent with these Disney cartoons that people have to live happily ever after. It's become
love and
right.
marriage.
It's now a right that, and I don't know how many times I've seen, mostly online, but I've heard it too, where I have a right to be happy.
Of course you do. If marriage is based on love, you do have that right. And that's what Christopher West will tell you. You have a right to love. And if you're not feeling it, someone's violating your rights. They're not capable of marriage. That's the problem.
What's love got to do? Got to do with it. What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do? Got to do with it. Who needs a heart when a heart